Hi everybody, Colin Anderson here again for the second part of this tutorial, which is how to age the plane and import it and extract it and make it look like it's been through a really bad fight. Okay, so just let me say before I start is if you guys want to catch up what I'm doing on a regular basis, check me out on Facebook. I think the link's on my YouTube page, and yeah, feel free to follow me or friend me and see what I'm up to. Okay, so here's the plane by itself with my model Sarah on it. Okay, I want to show you the actual plane by itself where I shot it at the Hawaii Aviation Museum. Okay, so this is basically it. So shot in a hangar type thing, I guess it is, or a showroom. Um, bit of natural light coming, or a bit I shouldn't say, a bit of artificial light coming in from the back. So it's got a little bit of rear lighting, which is kind of nice. If you look in here, it's you can sort of see that if we look at our original picture, that our light source is coming from the left, and in here it sort of looks like that's what's happening over here. So a little bit of rear lighting, which is nice. So it kind of matches with our hero shot once we import it. Okay, so to extract this plane, I don't use the wand technique or any of those extraction techniques that you see some people using. I really think that if you don't use the pen tool, it's something you should really get your head around because for things like this, it's really crucial to get a nice clean mask. I mean, I very rarely use any selection tool besides the pen tool, especially for things that have a lot of detail, intricate detail, like in here and in here, and there's lots happening around this plane. Okay, so if I just fill this quickly with, I want to show you this path. So let me just fill this with white or go a bit of a gray. Fill that, and if I click on my path, you're going to see my mask. All right. Turn that off so we can see. Okay, so you've got all the detail in here. So I've sampled, well, I've selected everything. I've even got the cable. If you look at that cable, that's pretty painful to do, I gotta say, because it's you got to keep the thickness of your path the same all along, which is always fun. But again, at the end of the day, once you've done this, you've got a perfect selection, taking just what you want. And with the extraction tools, it's a matter of going back and forth 1,000 times, going one less background, one more foreground. This way, you just say what you want, and you've got a nice, clean, perfect mask. Okay, so there's our mask ready to go. Let me just get rid of that white layer and get back to our original. So something like this, if I activate my mask, I probably would feather this. Um, I'm thinking 0.5 to 6 on something like this. I don't want the edges too soft. I want a little bit of softness because of the depth of field maybe. So I'm going to go to zero point 0.6 pixels on this. All right. There's my selection. Command J it, and let's go back to our original picture and pretend that it's in the shot. Okay, so we brought it in, and here we go. Okay, so let's go down to our plane and start from the bottom and work our way up. So again, the drop shadows, I kind of touched on the previous tutorial on how to do those drop shadows. Again, black brush, I'm going something like this. I'm probably going to go with a brush about 677 pixels. And if you look in here, it's quite fat and flattened. I would put a new layer up here. Again, the flow I would have quite low. I'm thinking again, um, maybe 3%, that low. And I'm just going to go in here and touch, tap, 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 and stuff like that. All right. If I move it into there, and again, just like that. Okay. That's what I've done there. So let's just get rid of that. And I've done a bigger one here, which is an overall. Okay, let me just show you here. So again, I think I mentioned in the previous tutorial about shadows having several different layers to them. So there's what I was mentioned as my immediate shadow. All right, so something like that. I'm going, again, I'd probably go to maybe like a, 6/7 is a bit big, so let's go down to maybe, let's go with 396. So I would do it, let me just turn this off so you can see what I'm doing. Let's zoom in a little bit here, like that. Okay, so I'm going, holding that down, 3%. And so this first shadow is quite hard, as you can see, something like that. All right. Once that's established, as we have, there's our immediate shadow. We have our secondary shadow, which is right here. Okay. And this is just a matter of painting that in just the same way I showed you. Big round brush. If I turn that layer off, it's just, there it is there. If I turn that off and do a new one, I'm just bringing it down. So push like that and slide. So something like that, okay? So hold, pull down like that. Do one over here, press, and then slide, slide, slide down like that, okay? Something like that, all right? And there it is there. Okay, I'm not going to spend too much time as usual because I want to get through this fairly quickly. The bigger shadow, so we have an overall shadow which would be our plane, which is right here. Um, Again, new layer, go to, again, I'm using these big fat rounded brush, and I'll push that bad boy up to about, let's go 2480 pixels. All right, so we're going to hold it. I'm just doing it right here, just like that to show you. Let me turn off our drop shadow, the big one, and I might move it down into here, and I might even transform that out. Okay, so I would Command T and I'd pull that into there and just move it around until I'm happy with the positioning, like that. Okay, and I would probably I think 100 is a bit too strong, so I get my fill and drop it down to about 82, and I think that looks pretty good. Okay, doesn't have to be a real hard shadow because, as I mentioned before, we've got a lot of fog and noise in the air. So as the sun gets close to the plane, it's going to be diffusing that shadow just a little bit. All right, so let me go back to my original shadow, which is there. And basically, I've done the same thing. Again, doing those secondary shadows in here, you'll notice, off and on. If I move that over here, you'll see the shape of it. And I've got the fill on that at 63%. I usually start out, at 100, and then I'll just eyeball it and go, okay, well, 100's maybe a bit too strong, so let's get 63, which is just enough. Okay. Sorry, my microphone's here to record. Okay, so let's go up to the next layer. All right. So here's our plane. The just really quickly, this crosshair here, I didn't actually cut that out. If I go to normal mode, you're going to see it's like that. Okay, let's zoom in a bit here. I didn't want to cut that out because it's so fine and I've used that technique which I mentioned earlier. Remember that this was shot on a fairly high key background, so just by cutting that away from the actual gun, setting it to multiply, I'm getting it to mask itself. I've got it below the plane so it hides. The fill on that, I would probably knock that down just to about 50%, just so it doesn't look too stark against the background. Okay, something like that. That's fine. All right, see, there it is there. If I move it around, and there it is. See, it's masking itself using multiply. Okay, let's zoom back over here. Now, I've also, if I turn off the model, lots of layers, just turn off her. I want to show you what I've done here. All right. So I'm trying to make her pop up against that background a bit. And I'm thinking I'm thinking that's a bit bright because if you see that, that's just, it looks like the sun's actually coming from the right hand side of the frame, which we know that it's actually coming from over this area here. So we need to have that in shadow a bit more. To do that, I'm just putting a levels adjustment above it. So I'd click there, I go up into here, levels, and what you'll see now is it's actually masking the plane itself. It's so the mask, this layer is affecting just the plane. So if I go like that, you're going to see it's actually just hitting the plane. It's not sampling outside. If I unclick that little button there, down here, this will affect the whole picture or anything below it. But by clicking that, it's just affecting my plane. All right. So what I would do now is if I turn that off and pretend we're doing it from scratch, I would look at just this area in here and I would go, okay, that's too bright. I need to get it to about there. All right. I think that's probably a good compromise. And I'd go, okay, cool. Now what I do is I want to have the plane actually light. I don't want the whole plane to be like that. So I'm going to click on that area in here and I'm going to go make sure my black's in front. I'm going to go option delete and fill that with black. What I can do now is if I put white, I can reveal the layer or reveal the level. Okay, so black hides, white reveals. So now if I go into here, I'm going to put my flow up fairly up to about 87. I'm going to just, maybe that's a bit too tough. Maybe just about in here. So I'm just going to paint in here and knock this down like that. Okay, just bringing that back in there just to get in the same value as the rest of the plane. Okay, so I'm going, okay, if I go before after, obviously it's way too bright. Now it looks a little bit more like the rest of the plane. Okay, because it is in a bit of shadow. Now let's just use the original one because that's probably done a better job. If I actually show you the mask I've done, so if you look in here, I'm turning on my channels, I'm turning my mask on, you can see how I've actually just sort of sampled in here and left the plane alone. So I'm basically just hitting that window there. Okay? All right, so now let's talk about aging this plane. All right, what I've done here is I've got a texture, rust texture that was shot on a wall that had a bit of obviously rust on it. So since the wall was white, I've used our old multiply trick. So I go normal. You're going to see that's the actual picture right there. All right. Now I've hit my levels because I'm trying to get the white to stand out more and the black to stand out more. So I'm trying to get the contrast level up so the white will disappear when I hit multiply. Multiply, and now I'm just left with the rust, the darker part of the shot. Okay. Now I'm going to actually show you how I do this a little bit, just a bit more carefully. All right, so there's one layer. Let's talk about this layer right here, which is like grease and oil has spilled from the front of the plane once it's on fire. Now, I don't actually know where the oil in a car actually is, but I have a feeling that if a plane was on fire, there would be oil in it somewhere and it would be spewing out the front there, doing real nasty things to the plane. Okay, so to create that texture there, I have used a a texture that I shot in the city. It's just of a cement wall. Okay, so what I want to do is just crop this to about there. Delete. We don't need the background, so let's go like that. Okay, so now let's import that into the shot here. If I go back into here, I want to make sure that we're floating in here. So if I drop that directly into this layer here, I know it's going to self-mask itself. I'll show you what I mean. So I'm dropping, just grabbing the layer, dropping it, and as you can see, I don't need that, don't save. As you can see, there it is right there. Okay. So what we're actually after is this part of the plane right here, all this nice runny type pattern in here. So if I just turn this counterclockwise, just I'm using the transform tool, and I'm just going to move this now into position. I'm using the lines of the of the pattern to get my perspective right. So I'm just going to transform this down and move it into here. All right. So I'm looking at this line here on the concrete, going, okay, that's on the same perspective. I'm looking at the lines down here, going, okay, that's on the same, that's on a good perspective. Okay, so let's just maybe transform this down just a little bit more. In there. All right. I might also go to warp, and I might just curve this in a bit so it looks like it's got a little bit more 3D dimension to it. All right, so let's just try that. Okay, just something like that. Get my perspective back in here again. I'm sort of just affecting in here. So grabbing these handles here, I'm sort of just rounding the front off, and the back I might just straighten up a little bit and go something like that. Let's get that straight in there. So now it's kind of rounding in here. You'll see in here, you'll notice it's got a nice shape to it. Okay, hit enter, and now let's just get rid of my old one. Okay, so that's what we have. Again, go to the technique of multiply, and we're getting the whites and blacks just separate. Okay, obviously that looks kind of awful, so let's hit our levels, Command L, and I'm going to crank on this one up here. All right, crank on that a bit more, 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 more. So I'm just trying to get that to disappear, that the mid gray. Now I'm going to go into the histogram on the left here, this handle here, and I'm going to pull that in, which is going to make our blacks a lot darker, which we want. Okay, so this is the area in here I'm really after, the front here. All right, we're getting a little bit of show through over here. That's okay. Maybe pull that back a bit. Okay, I'm just trying to get this to eat in here. So let's something a bit like that. Okay, that'll do for the time with the demonstration. All right. Now that's a little bit strong. I've got the fill on 100, and let's drop that down a bit into here. Okay. Now I've got a lot of stuff in here I don't want. Obviously, all this in here is not really ideal. So let's do a mask. So again, icon mask down here, click on that. Black brush in front to erase. Again, remember black erases. Let's get our opacity up, or our flow up to 100. And let's just get rid of some of this crap over here. All right. See, I don't mind a little bit in here. It's okay. Like that. Okay, that looks pretty good. All right, so there's basically that layer there. You'll notice this getting a bit in here. Let's get rid of that. I'm just going to keep it into this area here. All right, a bit on there. That's okay. All right, you notice something here I'll show you. Sometimes this works out quite nicely. You can see this line happening down here. If you want to use that as an added texture, what you can do is just do a marquee around, let's do it around here. If I want to map this to the plane, what I can do is do a marquee around that, make sure I'm selected my actual texture layer, not the mask. Just click on that. And if I go Command T and go to warp, what I can do is just shift the shape of this line to make it look like it's actually part of the wing. And this could be a way you might want to add just a little bit more depth and texture to your plane. So let me just hide that. See, like that? Hit enter. So now it looks like it's part of the wing, which is kind of cool. If I revert it, see, it's sort of now going a straight line, which tells me that it's a floating texture. But if I do that and warp it, it follows the contour of the plane wing, which is kind of interesting. So you can try things like that. All right. We've got problems over here, obviously. So to deal with that, we can mask it. We could go into here, Command delete. We could just mask that away there, but I kind of wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind using a bit more darkness in there. So I could even push the mask, push the whole layer. I'm going to unlink the mask. So what happens now is just the layers moving and not the mask. Okay, so what I could do is just move that into there, and I could cover that whole thing up into there so the black's going in like that. All right. Alternatively, what I could do is get my smudge tool, and if I'm feeling a bit ambitious, I could just rub that into there. Let's get the fill up or the strength up to about 90, or let's say 91. All right, and I can just push that into there is another way. And remember, since I've got this little icon here, the arrow, I am masking just in the plane. So this is never going to go outside the plane. It's always going to stay in here. So just by doing this, you can, pull it back in to make it look like a little bit more oil spilling out the other side as well. So if you play with that a bit, you might get some nice techniques, just like that. Something like that could be kind of cool. All right. Let's go back to my original one because that's what I've been using. Okay. Um, let's next. I've added another one here. Nothing too special here. I'll put a layer in there, and I've just got a brush with a textured brush, probably something like that. And I've just gone to my flow at probably about maybe let's try 20% using just black, and I'm just going like what am yeah, it's just like that. And by doing that, I'm adding a little bit more texture. See if I go before and after, you may want to go like, yeah, it's very subtle. It is doing it, but it's very subtle. Something like that. Just for a little bit of different texture and grit to the plane, just to sell the shot a bit better. Okay, so obviously we've had a really bad day at the office. We've got bullet holes, we've got the plane on fire, and to do the flame, what I've done is gone below the actual flame. I'm going to show you in a second how to do the flame, but I need a bit of light coming from the flame because it is basically a light source. So I put a layer above that. I'm going to set to overlay, which gives kind of like a glow. It's not, it has like a translucent look to it. I'm going to sample somewhere in here. I might click on that and make it a bit more orange. Okay, and just for the flow at around 20% should be fine. You just paint that in there, really really easy like that. Okay, and that's all that is there. I've got a bit of yellow in there too, so go into the yellow and just a little bit more depth to the picture because the flame has different hotness to it, so you might have a bit of lighter cast to it, and that's just adding that glow from the fire in there. All right, the smoke. Now I've mentioned in the previous tutorial how I do smoke. Again, touch on it briefly. If I go to normal, that actually is real smoke shot on a white background, which was a cloud. I set it to multiply. Again, I've done a very quick selection here, probably using a wand selection or selective color. Got a lot of crap I've taken from the background, which I'm not going to worry about because once I set it to multiply, my white disappears and I'm left with just the black. Okay. I've got the fill down to 78% because 100, if you look at that, a little bit too strong. I want a bit of transparency to it. 78% fill is pretty damn good. Okay, let's talk about fire. Um, Fire. Now, when you're doing fire, do not try to mask fire out. It's impossible. You're going to be grabbing the background and it's going to be sampling through and it's going to look really horrible. The best way to do fire is make sure when you get the fire plate is you shoot the fire on a black background. That's really the secret of it is get your file right in the first place. All right. So let's just have a look at this. Let me look at this. I'll show you the bigger one, might be a bit easier. All right. I'll put it into normal. So there's our fire there shot on a black background. All right. Now, if we set it to lighten, what you'll notice here is all the black disappears and we're left with just the flame. Again, this works similar to the multiply filter we were talking about earlier when we did the oil spilling out. But with lighten, black disappears. So if I move this around, no matter where, well, it doesn't hold too well in the lighter areas. That's one thing you keep an eye out for. But in this case here, when you're in the darker areas, it's going to be holding pretty good. Now, if you look at that close up, that's masking just beautifully. All right. Although we're holding a little bit of the detail, which is really nice. I've got a mask in there just because I want it like it's eating around the propeller. But that's self-masking. We don't have to mask it. It's already ready to go. Just by hitting lighten, it's done. Really easy. I'll put a mask on here because what I want to do is I want to have like some of it's behind the propeller as well. So if I can bring a bit, let me just get my flow a bit higher. See, I'm eating away, so like that. I want to go like that. Go white, and I can put a bit back in, and this way I can go back and forth and do things, cool things like that. Okay, let's go back to the way we had it. Yeah, something like that. Okay. Also with the flames, if you when you shoot flames, obviously they got a mind of their own. They're not going to go in the shape you want them to. So once you bring your flame in, you know, to get in shape, transform it. Command T to transform, hit your warp, and just grabbing these little handles in here, handle up here, these little cross sections here, you can manipulate it into the shape you want. All right. You can also use your liquefy tool, but in this case, I think the warp tool works great. I love the warp tool. I use it all the time, on a daily basis. Okay, something like that. Something you'll just have to look and eyeball and see which way you like the best. Okay, so that's how we do our fire. Nice and easy. Okay, let's have a talk about these bullet holes. Again, this is really easy. These bullet holes, they're actually real. I think I shot them at another military museum. I think it was a Zero tail wing, had all these bullet holes, so I just went up and shot them, and I've just used them here. And what I've done, let's get this one down here, which is a good shape. Let's move it into here. All right, so nothing too difficult here. Again, I haven't really done a big mask on this, so I've brought the shot in from the my master, which is the tail wing with the hole. I've done a very loose selection around the wing, or around the hole. Brought it into here, and to do it properly, what I do is get saturation. It had a bit of it was a bit green, I think, the coloring or the paint on the plane. So what I want to do is get rid of that green because I want to match it to this plane here. So I just get the saturation and I go all the way like that. Don't worry about opening a new document and converting it to grayscale. Just hit your saturation there and that'll work fine. Now to sell the shot here, all we do is set it to overlay. So there it is normal the way I brought it in. Obviously it's too light, the color's wrong, and even the mask is pretty crappy. But just by setting it to overlay, you're going to notice it is taking on the background color beautifully. Okay, now where I move that, it's going to be a pretty good fit. On the curves down here might be a problem. You might have to match perspective, but on this flat area in here, no matter where I move that, by setting it to overlay, it is sampling the background. Okay, so that's really easy. Doesn't get much easier than that. So if you want to, you put a mask on that, click there. Black, remember black reveals. So I zoom in. If I want to change the shape of this, let's go to fill 100%. I can just take away more of the, take more of the metal texture away. But in this case here, I quite like the metal. It looks a bit tougher. All right. I can put some back. So if I've gone to white brush, white reveals, so I can even paint some back in. All right. Really easy. I've also done them all on individual layers, so I can go in and move them to any place I want. So I kind of like the idea that the bullets went right across into the engine here, which is set on fire. All right, that's the thinking. Okay, that's how we do bullets. Nice and easy. Alrighty. Uh, Also, now I want to have a bit of smoke coming out from the engine area. Obviously, this is where all the trouble started, right around these holes here. So to do the black smoke, what I did was get a candle. No, I didn't get a candle. So I got a piece of paper, and I just lit I got a black background, lit the paper on fire, blew it out, and with two flashes from behind, lit it. Now it doesn't. It looks not quite right, and you're going to wonder why. Because I wanted the smoke to be black. Okay, I don't want white smoke in this case. So with candle or with the smoke coming from the paper, it's actually white smoke. So if I show you the original file, this is what I actually had. Okay, that's basically it here. All right. You can actually see a bit of the paper down here. All right. So to get that to be black smoke, there's my file. What I do now is I get it. I go Command I to invert it. All right. So now everything's actually inverted. So my white smoke is now black. My background is now white. Again, we go to the old technique of multiply, and our white disappears, and we're left with just the smoke. So that again, we don't have to mask anything. It's ready to go. Super easy. Okay. Um, that's about it for the plane damage. I think we've covered that all pretty closely. Now, if we just talk quickly about our model, um, I shot her in the studio. I used a Photoflex Octagon light. I think it's one of those 8-foot big suckers. Just the camera left, and if I show you the original file, you're going to see that she's a bit overexposed. She's on a white background. I don't use green for my backgrounds. I always shoot everything on white. I don't like using green for keying because I find it tends to bleed onto the model, and then I've got to get rid of green bleed, which is really annoying. So I always shoot everything on white. All right. Let's have a talk about what we do now. Okay, so now we've got her on the background. I've masked her feet away, obviously. If I switch my mask off, you're going to see her feet. Okay, there. First thing I've done, I'm looking at that going, she's probably needs to be warmed up a bit. So I've just using this technique of using the icon here, I'm just affecting her. I'm putting a little bit of yellow into her, a little bit of green, a little bit of red. All right. Okay, nothing too scientific, it's just eyeballing it. Now over here, I'm doing an overall, dropping her luminosity down a bit. She's a bit too poppy there, if that's a word. Just a bit too bright. So what I'm doing here is I'm not actually using the top histogram, these ones in here, all right? Because I want something more of an overall shadow. These top ones here tend to affect, they tend to make a shot more contrasty. These bottom ones here work almost like a shadowing. You know, it's an overall flat type of coloring, which is what I want here. It's not picking up on the contrasty whites and darks here. If you notice that, see how we're just getting the whites are staying a bit whiter, the darks are just going darker. We're in here, we're just getting an overall dump of light, which is what I want. Okay. In here, we're doing a mask, similar technique to what we did the window. I'm just thinking that her right side is a bit too bright. We've got our light source coming from camera left, so I don't want her shoulder that bright. Okay, just simple mask. If I show you the mask, there it is right there, just affecting that side there. All right. Again, if I fill that with white, I would get on there and I would look at just pretending I ignore the rest of her body and I just watch what's happening in here. Okay, so I'm looking at just her shoulder, going, that looks pretty good. Okay, now I fill it with black because I want to reveal. I get a white brush. Remember, white reveals. And now I'm just going to go into here and I'm going to darken this side down, something like that. Okay. Now we're getting more of a lighting situation from camera left to a darkness on camera right. Also on the feet here, I'm thinking that since the light's coming from over here, you might have a bit darker light may come over the top here, and just maybe just a little bit darker on her legs. If you look at my mask, I'm just getting in the legs here a bit, okay? Because I'm just thinking that's still too bright. I think it needs to be down a bit. Um, Fill 77. I could probably even reduce that a bit and go down to about 60 or 56. You know, if I go to 100, probably too strong. But it's just easier to do it around here. So let's do it around 56. That looks pretty good. All right. Okay, nearly done. What I'm going to talk about quickly is her makeup. I tend like to do all these special or these effects like grease and dirt in Photoshop. If you got your model in the studio and you start applying paint or makeup to her to make her look dirty, if it doesn't work out, then you got to wash it off, and her face starts getting red and blotchy, and that's not a good look. All right, so to do this mud effect, I've got more control if I just do it in Photoshop. So what I would do is I would click on her, go into a new layer, and get a bit of black. And I've already done this previously, and it's flattened, so I can't show the original layer. But to do really quickly, I would set this to either overlay or multiply. Let's just set it to multiply, and I'll show you the difference between overlay and multiply. All right, so let's go to multiply, black brush. Let's go to the flow quite low. Let's say 8%. It might be a little bit strong, but let's have a look. All right. So you can actually download splatter brushes. If you Google Photoshop splatter brushes, you should be able to come across a set that you can get for free. Let's just find some of mine here somewhere. As you can see, I've got lots of brushes. All right. No, this should be. Oh, that's big. All right. All right. So I'm going to go a bit higher on this because these brushes tend to be a bit opaque. All right. So maybe a little bit bigger. Like that. Okay. So multiply, and I'm just things like that. Okay. This isn't done really accurately. I'm just going to show you how it can be done. All right. So like that, like that. If I set to overlay to show you the difference, it's got more of a transparent look, which is kind of interesting. Okay, you try that, try both modes, do several layers. Also, don't be afraid to get a smudge brush because we're pretending that she's hit by oil. So oil would be, when she's in a plane, she'd probably be rubbing up against things. So, you could even have things like that happening. So just get little areas and just maybe rub like that. Okay? That's how I've done her face in here. Obviously, her face is protected by the goggles, so we keep that part of her eyes clean, which is nice because you want her eyes to pop out a bit. And just do things like that. If you find you do something really dopey and go into everywhere like that, remember, add a mask. Click your mask icon here. Black reveals. Remember, black reveals. Go to your brush, and you can even go in here and start reversing what you did. Let's pump the flow up to about 100. And we can go now back and erase the mask. And this just gives another dimension to the texture. Okay, that easy. If you think it's too strong, remember, knock the fill down. There's 100. You take it down to whatever you like, just eyeballing it like that. And that is basically it. I think we've gone through it all. I don't see anything else I haven't covered in the previous tutorials. Okay, that's about it, guys. I'm kind of sick of talking, so I think I'll wind this up right now. Okay, thanks a lot. Talk to you later. Bye.